Hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here after over 2 years of not being on the conference in person. It's really great to come again and talk to you. So today I have like a little bit more lightweight topic, or a topic from a other side, right? I work at JetBrains team, and my main responsibility is WebStorm, and I write for you support for Angular, Vue, and HTML. To kind of introduce the topic which I want to talk today on how to improve your experience with smaller libraries, with CSS icon libraries and things like that. I want to give you an example of how some things improved your developer experience already. So if we do JSON processing, right, and we do it in Kotlin, for instance, it requires you to write down the typings from the model for the model. But once you do that and you read JSON and then you process it in your code, you get a nice code completion. And if you mistype something, the editor will tell you, well, you're wrong, or things like that. Yeah. But if we do the same thing in JavaScript, it's not that good, right? We read some message, and then we're like in a dark, what is there in this JSON? So this is just an example, right, of doing JSON processing. So that's why TypeScript, I think, was so successful, because it allows you to actually document what is happening in the library in your source code. I mean, document. Types are a way to document your code and what you should be expecting in the code. And TypeScript did it really great by giving you DTS files, so that even if you write your library in JavaScript, you can still describe it as a black box through typings. If some library developer is not willing to ship TypeScript with their library, you still have the add types npm namespace. And I think that really improved productivity in JavaScript world. I'm coming from Java, Delphi, and I'm coming from type languages. And when I first had to do some coding in JavaScript, I was just lost completely. It was just terrible experience for me. So since there is a TypeScript on the market, I can finally code something in JavaScript. But here comes the problem with web stuff, let's say. There are small libraries like HTMX, which are trying to gain popularity. HTMX is just an example of a cool library, I think. It's enabling you to write Ajax, CSS transitions, and WebSockets, and some other things directly in HTML as attributes. But when you want to use that library in the editor, it's actually not really nice, right? You get like unknown attribute, you don't get those CSS classes HTMX is using, and things like that. And this is like from us, from IDE providers, it's a problem, because we want actually to provide you with a cool ways to be productive when you use the library you like. Same things goes for things like, I don't know, CSS icons, of which FontAwesome is one of the examples. What I do when I use FontAwesome, I always go from the editor to the browser and check the icons there, and then I go back to the editor and then I type the icon, and sometimes I misspell it, and it's like back and forth, really not productive thing. And then there are things like Angular custom events, when you have your own Angular event manager and you do some custom stuff, even if in a supported framework like Angular or Vue. there are still some places where it could be really, the experience could be really improved. Here is an example of Bootstrap's Vue with their icons, which are just polluting code completion, and there are like a lot of them, and you don't really know which to pick up. So that's where we've started kind of a project, and it's going on for already like 3 years, to develop a format for documenting things which actually are present in HTML and CSS and maybe other things. The format is open source. This is an example of how you describe a Vue component. And our goal was to make it inclusive. So basically, it's not when we design it, we don't want to lock it to our kind of IDEs, but we want it to be present everywhere, actually. So that linters can actually lint your HTML file and tell you, well, this attribute from this library is actually deprecated. Don't use it anymore, right? Or that you can create documentation in a JSON format and then nicely create a portal from the JSON documentation. So that's our goals when we were developing the format, and that it's going to be universal. So you can document Vue, web components, and any other stuff. So here is an example of how you define, for instance, be alert component in Vue. And you have a special kind of namespace, Vue components, where you add an object and specify name, where we can find the source code, what are the descriptions, properties, events, and things like that. So I think the format is pretty descriptive in itself. And you can specify contributions to HTML and CSS. The schema for the format is available on Schema Store. So if you just create a file webtypes.json or whatever .webtypes.json, you will automatically get the schema. You link the file through the webtypes property in your package.json. For now, we only support the package.json. There are plans to support package managers from other languages like PHP, Python, or even Java, maybe. And the library typings, similarly to what is happening with TypeScript type definitions, are available at web types if someone doesn't want to ship web types with their library. You can also use it for local projects. So when you have troubles with, you do some not really, you do have some custom stuff and you actually want this to be visible to you or other developers working with you on a library, then you can also use them in your local projects or private libraries. And the main thing which took a lot of time to develop was our name patterns. So basically, you can think like if you have an Angular binding, right? It has its own syntax. You have the open parentheses, then you have the name of the property to bind to, then you have closing parentheses. But also it has other formats that you have. You have on dash, and then you have data dash, and it's kind of a syntax you have to describe, right? And in Vue, you have Vue directives. There's like even more complex syntax. So we wanted to cover all of these cases that you can nicely describe what is the library providing. And the main goal is that it's for developers, that you can get the documentation in the editor, so you don't have to switch between the portal with documentation and your editor, and you're just being more productive. I think it's the same, I hope it's going to be the same kind of difference which made TypeScript so popular, that you just have this where you code, you don't have to switch context. And let me show you some examples. This is how, with web types, you can actually code with HTMX library. So the library is probably going to ship web types in a few weeks, I think. Once it does, then you actually get documentation for CSS classes it's using. It's also faster to type because you don't have to type everything, right? You can only type HTMX, HXT, and then autocomplete. And the other cool, this is the web types content for HTMX library. It's really simple. There is not much complicated stuff there, but it's already a lot in terms of developer experience. The other example, which I kind of find pretty cool, is that for Bootstrap Vue icons, you can actually kind of create like 2 steps auto-completion. That first you have B icon, and then you have a list of icons all together with the actually rendered icons. So you don't actually have to go to the portal to find this icon you need to use. Or you can ensure that you're using the correct icon. And here the JSON is a little bit more complex because you have this pattern thing where you specify where to take items from, and then you specify the template, like it's B icon, then we have auto-completion, and then we have the item, and you contribute those icons to the Vue Bootstrap icons kind. In the icon property, you can specify the path to the file, or you can actually insert an SVG XML code there, and it's going to be rendered. Just a little bit more about syntax. This is like a complete file with a description of a slot. Altogether, it's with its name as a custom tag for Vue.js. Every, let's say, symbol can contain symbols inside. So we have an element, and then we know that element can have attributes, and it just nicely works in describing how in describing components, or like for instance for web components, you can describe which CSS properties the component has. Our plans for like promoting web types and making this more mature are that first of all, we finished like bulletproofing the format by migrating our Vue and Angular support to be built on top of web types. So we actually define the semantics of the frameworks for Vue and Angular in web types. We worked on providing support for web components. So now you can specify custom CSS properties and a lot of various things. We got great support from web components community here. And as a further milestone, we want to open source the pattern evaluation code, which is the main thing allowing us to actually do things like support Vue or Angular through web types. And it is actually open source already, but it's open source in Kotlin, so probably not really useful for JavaScript in JavaScript builds or somewhere else. So we're going to translate it to TypeScript most likely and open source it. We're working on documentation. We'll also be further bulletproofing format by migrating our Svelte and React support to web types. We're planning to support some other non-NPM package managers. While we migrate to web types, it also allows you, for instance, if you create custom Angular event manager, it allows you to create web types for your library with custom events, and then they will be documented and provided for the consumers of the library in the editor. How can you get involved? You can, of course, contribute web types to your favorite library. It's pretty cool. I contributed them to like several libraries already, mostly Vue and mostly Vue and HTMX. Of course, you can use web types in your projects to help your colleagues working with the library, for instance. And you can provide us with feedback, report bugs, and improve the schema if you find something lacking there. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you like the talk. And if you have any questions, I'll be in the lobby after the presentation. Thank you.